believe that it gives us, the right flexibility to go after the capabilities that we need to be successful going forward.
Understood. I don't know, General Milley, if you want to dive in here. So how would you explain this? And I've argued that we should have gotten rid of the unfunded requirements list a long time ago. But how do you explain the service chiefs submitting this list? I agree with Secretary Austin. I think he's absolutely right about where the budget's at. But what are we doing with this list of things that to members up here makes us think that we're not meeting our needs?
As a former service chief for 4 years, Chief of Staff of the Army, the unfunded requirements list, and everyone probably looks at it slightly differently, but generally speaking, I would say that requirements always, I can't think of a budget where requirements do not exceed resources. And the whole purpose of a budget is to prioritize that which is most important down to that which is least important. And the unfunded requirements list, given an amount of money to a given service, anything that goes beyond what the budget is that they're given goes on to an unfunded requirements list. And these things are pages long, as you said, in the billions of dollars. The key question, though, is relative to your opponent. Everything's relative to someone. In this case, relative to a pacing threat of China, relative to Russia, terrorists, et cetera. Are those unfunded requirements critical path capabilities that are required to succeed? And the answer is no, in my opinion, my professional opinion. Others may have different opinions. If they were critical, then they need to be higher on the priority list and in the base budget. And the chiefs, service chiefs, and service secretaries all go through that drill. It's a hard drill. I had to do it with several service secretaries. We had night courts and so on. But the unfunded requirement lists are less important than which is in the base budget. The reason they're submitted is to provide the committee and Congress, the representatives of the people, to determine if those unfunded requirement lists meet the needs, and you have to make some assessments and determine to take such and such out of the base budget and add something from the requirements list. It's a flexibility option for the committees, and it gets submitted every year. Try to minimize them to the amount possible because we really want the base budget is what needs to be passed.
Thank you. I think that's a good explanation. And again, I'll stand by the statement that, over the last 15 years in particular, the amount of money that has gone to programs that haven't performed, I'd rather have the service chiefs go through and tell us how they're going to make sure that their programs are actually going to perform as intended and on budget, and the mistakes that we've made with the money that has been wasted, so we don't do that again. And I have no doubt whatsoever if we did that, we'd have more than enough money to meet the requirements as we do. And as I mentioned, again, I want to compliment this department in the last couple of years, a series of secretaries of defense who have done the hard work to do that scrub, to go back in there and learn the lessons from what went wrong and try and fix it. And I think that is the most important thing we can do to meet our defense needs going forward. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Milley, as I noted in my opening statement, China already has a larger Navy, more troops, more missiles, more hypersonics than we do. Where are you most concerned that China has gained or may soon gain an advantage against us?
There's several areas. If you roll the clock back to 1975 and the reforms of Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese economy has risen at a rate of about 10%, down to 6 or 7% recently, and it's projected to reduce a little bit more. But with that massive economy, with that massive amount of money, China has developed an extraordinarily capable military. They are not, to be clear, they are not currently superior to the United States military, but their aim, their object, is to be at least co-equal to, if not superior. And that is possible. If we stood still, that would be possible in a certain amount of years. And I think that the area of cyber and space, those are two critical areas, and subsurface submarines are a third area, all of which we need to watch. But there's also emerging technologies that are very concerning, things like hypersonics, man-machine interface, changing the relationship of men or human beings to the machine, linking that to various very high-powered computer systems. There's a wide variety of information technologies that they're working on. These are all concerning. And then I would throw in robotics, and most importantly is artificial intelligence. These are emerging technologies that are going to hit in time and space in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years max. And we, the United States, need to be out front in all of them. Otherwise, we're going to be setting up future generations for a very difficult situation relative to China.
Good. It's a great answer, and I agree. that the real threat is down the road. But that's the point we can't put off. We can't keep deferring taking action on keeping pace with China, because it's going to get us in a bad situation. So while this budget is basically level funding, just a little bit of a dip, it's irresponsible in the long term. And I'm not just throwing off on this president. The last president came to us with a budget that was inadequate, and we got him to a better place, and I'm hoping we get this president to a better place. And I frankly hate it for y'all, because y'all are outstanding military leaders, and you know what we need, and you're just doing your job trying to spin this thing up or shine it up. But it's not what we need for our long-term military growth. General Milley, as the chairman just alluded to, we got $25 billion unfunded priority list that came to us, and included in that are priorities such as $1.7 billion for a new destroyer, $1.4 billion for F-15Xs, and $300 million for the defense of Hawaii and Guam. You don't think those should be in this year's funding priorities?
A couple of points. Hawaii and Guam, no one, China, Russia, or anyone else, should think Hawaii and Guam are not defended. Because it's on an unfunded requirements list, doesn't mean Hawaii and Guam aren't defended. We have a tiered capability in the Pacific arrayed explicitly to defend U.S. territory. The United States of America mainland and Hawaii, Guam, and our allies and partners are very well defended. So I don't want anyone to misinterpret that. There are capabilities that we'd like to improve on, but they didn't meet the threshold of the base budget, therefore they're in an unfunded requirement list. For the destroyer, we're adding another destroyer next year, so it's going to be in the 23 budget, Vice 22. Again, hard choices, prioritization, that's what budgets are all about, and that's what the services did, that's what the Secretary of Defense did, and I fully support it. And I think this budget, 715, provides for the adequate defense of the United States of America for FY22.
Yeah. Again, I understand, I know this is the president's budget and you got to do your best, but the commander of Indo-PACOM says we need a easy shore on Guam and we need a new radar system on Hawaii. Sure. Granted, they're defended, not defended as well as they need to be, and we need to be taking action to protect them. General Milley, you testified before the Senate and said that China and Russia combined are spending more money on defense than the United States. How much risk are we inviting by failing to keep pace with China when it comes to this kind of spending?
I think we are keeping pace, and I think we're ahead of China individually as a country. When you combine China and Russia, and we'd have to go into a classified session to show how we do this mathematically, but the combined budgets, when everything's taken into account and you normalize for the cost of personnel, et cetera, then you will find that the combined budgets of China and Russia do exceed that of the U.S. Department of Defense budget. In certain areas, I'm concerned, like research development and some advanced modernization technologies, those are areas which I'd rather go into a classified session. But in open hearing and factually correct, we are keeping pace. In fact, we're exceeding China or Russia in the specific niche capabilities. And I don't want anyone to walk away from any hearing, and we're talking to more people than just in this room right now. I don't want China or Russia to ever think that the United States military is not better than their military. We are in all domains, every day, 24/7. And that's not just bragging, that's fact.
And I completely agree. Everything you just said is accurate today. Mm-hmm. But you and I both know, as you've alluded to earlier, if we don't step it up, they are going to meet us or possibly surpass us in capability if we don't get on pace to make sure we never lose standing with them. Now, listen, I know what y'all got to say to this, but I got to ask it. Every combatant commander and service chief that's been before this committee, I've asked, did they support the National Defense Strategy Commission's recommendation that we increase defense spending in foreseeable future 3 to 5% over inflation? Both of you have publicly stated before the president's budget came out that that's the way you felt as well. How do you feel today? Do you still believe that that should be what we are doing when it comes to defense spending? Secretary Austin, you first.
I support the president's budget, and as I stated earlier, sir, I think that this budget gives us the ability to go after the things that we need to be very competitive going forward. And I absolutely agree with you that we are not only cited on what we're doing today, but we must be cited on what the requirements are and the capabilities will be in the future. And so we're working hard to build those capabilities to meet those requirements. And I think this budget does that. So.
General Milley?
I agree. I fully support this budget. I wouldn't have said it was adequate if I didn't. As far as the 3 to 5%, of course, 3 to 5% or 1% or 2%, we could spend it appropriately with the UFR list, et cetera. But the president is looking at a wider angle view for a nation's strength, not just a military strength. And it's a combined strength of the nation. It's critically important that we have an incredibly healthy economy. Otherwise, you'll never have a military. You have to have an educated workforce. You have to have all of these things in order to have a good military. So if this president's budget requires other parts of the government to have increases for various reasons, fine. This budget is adequate to defend the United States of America. And if given more money, we would certainly spend it appropriately in a disciplined way in accordance with the priorities on the UFR list. But I fully support this budget, absolutely.
Okay. Last question. Both the chairman and I have been very frustrated that we got this budget so late. And I fear it's going to make it difficult for us to get an appropriates bill, defense appropriates, and NDA passed in a reasonable amount of time. Then it may force a CR. Secretary Austin, could you tell me what the implications of another CR would be?
And so if we have a CR, Ranking Member Rogers, it will adversely affect readiness. It will slow down our ability to modernize. It will also adversely affect the industry. And so I think that's really important. I think we need to do everything we can to prevent having a detrimental effect on our ability to man, train, and equip the force. And what the CR does is it prevents you from initiating new starts, and that's a problem.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Landrigan is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony today and for your service to our nation. I want to pick up where we left off just a few minutes ago, talking about preparing and investing for not only today but for tomorrow, and because that revolves around research and development. Mr. Secretary, the FY22 budget is the largest request for research, development, testing, and evaluation to date, and which I applaud. Yet, overall basic and applied research funding is down from FY21. I think this is a mistake. And given, just by way of example, that a COVID-19 vaccine was a result of basic defense research 5 to 10 years ago, which resulted in the mRNA vaccine being developed. That was directly from a DARPA project, that early and applied research. Thank God that that research actually bore fruit and that it happened in the first place. So I appreciate that in our conversation on Monday, you said that you would look into it. My question is, will you commit to getting me a firm assessment of why we cut these vital budget lines by mid-July so that we can consider it during the NDAA?
Let me just say again that this is the largest investment in RDT&E that this department has ever made, which speaks to our commitment to ensure that we're investing in the right things to make sure that we're relevant in the future. And I absolutely agree with you on the importance of resourcing science and technology and other things. And I would also say that the areas that you're concerned about, while if you look at our investment this year for this budget for 22, it's actually above what the forecasted investment was in 21. Not what they were resourced for, but actually what they asked for in the budget. You know, we've asked for more. So again, we'll work hard to make sure that we have the right monies in the right place to ensure that we maintain a robust capability in this realm.
Okay.
But,
Secretary, if you could just give me a yes or no answer. If you'd look into that assessment, you said you'd give me if we can get it before the time frame so that we can consider it in the NDAA, I would appreciate that.
okay.
Thank you. Next, I'm really concerned with how the department has addressed electromagnetic spectrum operations. Our adversaries clearly investing in technologies to dominate the domain while we continue to consider it an afterthought in some ways, from my perspective. When can we expect the electromagnetic spectrum superiority strategy implementation plan, and what do you think is the first step to regaining our advantage?
Well, the first step to making sure that we maintain an advantage is to make sure that that we have a coordinated effort across the board to identify what the threats are and make sure that we have the right capabilities to be dominant in that space. Our vice chairman is currently leading this effort on, for our forces, and I'm confident that as he works his way through this, along with our deputy secretary, he'll come back with some good recommendations, and we'll implement those that are appropriate.
Secretary, the the Department of Defense officially recognizes 5 domains of warfare. I think we all agree that cybersecurity is the national security challenge of the 21st century. The four of those domains, the senior civilian is a service secretary. Cyber has a deputy assistant secretary, which is 4 rungs lower than the other warfighting domains. Why does this make sense, especially when U.S. service members are in contact with and engaging our adversaries in cyberspace daily?
Well, cyber is obviously incredibly important to us. I think we're very effective in this domain, and I think currently we have the right oversight for our cyber efforts. Matter of fact, I was just out with General Nakasone here a couple of weeks ago, reviewing what he's doing and looking at his programs, talking to his troops, and I'm very impressed by the capability that he continues to develop. And we are investing in cyber. $10.4 billion in this budget focused on cyber, and so it's important to us, and it will remain important to us.
Thanks, Jim. I'll yield back.
Mr. Wilson is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank our witnesses for your service. As a 31-year Army veteran myself, as the grateful dad of 4 sons who have served in Iraq, Egypt, and Afghanistan, I particularly appreciate your dedication and what you mean for our troops and military families. And for each of you, the issue of pit production. I'm grateful that in the FY22 presidential budget request, it fully funds the modernization of our nuclear triad. A credible nuclear deterrent is key to maintaining peace during great power competition. This requires modernized and robust nuclear weapons infrastructure, including the capability to produce plutonium pits. Dr. Charlie Verdon, the acting administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration, Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, NNSA nominee Jill Ruby, and Admiral Charles Richard are all on record supporting a 2-site solution for pit production. In addition, just yesterday, General John Hyten reinforced the importance of a 2-site solution in a letter to Ranking Member Mike Turner. I request unanimous consent to enter the letter into record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Secretary Austin and Chairman Milley, do you agree that limiting pit production to 1 site leaves us too little redundancy? What are the benefits of a 2-site solution to the resiliency of our nuclear weapons infrastructure to establish peace through strength? Secretary Austin.
Well, thank you. And first of all, thank you for your incredible service. Very, very impressive, and we're grateful. On the issue of pit production, as you know, the Department of Energy is the lead element for that and oversees the efforts of NNSA. We work with the Department of Energy to ensure that we have the right approach. We want to make sure that we have adequate resources in terms of pits and other elements that go into supporting our triad there. So we continue to do a review of our overall capabilities, and as we review those capabilities, we'll determine what the appropriate number of sites ought to be.
And hey, in accordance with the President's budget, do you support 2 sites?
I support the President's budget, yes.
and with 2 sites. Thank you. Excuse me, General Milley.
Yes, I'm aligned with General Hyden's recommendation. Yes, so we talked about it. The broader issue, of course, is the number one priority actually in the budget is a recapitalization of the nuclear enterprise. And the Secretary's directed a nuclear posture review that's ongoing. We'll see what the results are. But in general, as a general comment here, the entire nuclear enterprise needs to be recapitalized, and that includes the pit production at 2 sites.
Thank you very much, each of you. And Secretary Austin, Guam is a critical Western Pacific theater of operations logistical hub for our Navy and a priority target, sadly, for the Chinese Communist Party. The patriotic American territory of Guam is appreciated for having the highest percentage of military service of any state or territory. The Missile Defense Agency's FY22 request includes $118.3 million to develop an architecture for the defense of Guam. Still, the MDA does not have a detailed plan exactly what it would be. Given China's increasingly hostile posture in peacetime military buildup, the largest peacetime military buildup in the history of the world, what can we expect the status of a detailed overview of the system and its deployment timeline?
Well, as the chairman had mentioned earlier, Guam is a part of the United States of America. In the United States of America, we will make sure that we have appropriate, adequate defense mechanisms to protect our territory here. And, you know, the $118 million that we've allocated for missile defense is a start as we develop integrated capabilities. In terms of a specific timeline of when our assessment and our work will be completed, I'll take that for the record, Congressman Wilson.
Thank you. And finally, Israel has been subject to 4,500 Iranian rockets from Gaza by Hamas. But the Iron Dome has been successful. Ms. Secretary, we could be working more closely to promote Iron Dome.
You've heard us say a number of times that you know, we are committed to the defense of Israel, and I met with.
And I do apologize, gentleman's time has expired, so we will move on to Mr. Larson, and if you want to take that one for the record, we can do that. Mr. Larson is recognized.
Thank you,
for
Mr.
5 minutes.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Austin, over the last several months, media has reported on a number of damning substantial issues within the Special Operations Forces ranks. I want to know what DoD is doing to transparently identify, track, and respond to reports of misconduct in SOF.
In terms of what the department is doing to focus on that, we've not taken any additional actions. As you know, we have additional oversight of a Special Operations Command now, and that person reports directly to me. He's got a dual track reporting responsibility, one directly to me, one to our policy, so that we can make sure that special operations are integrated in policy. I've spoken with a commander of Special Operations Command. He is focused on these issues, and he's really digging in to make sure that he understands the nature of the issues and taking preventative measures to ensure that those types of things don't occur in the future.
It's a real serious issue, and I appreciate you taking it seriously. And on that last point you've made, we've talked a lot about domains, but I want you to change your brain a little bit here, on literally, because I want to talk about the cognitive domain that SOCOM and SOF says they want to focus on in terms of improving the cognitive domain of our war fighters and SOF. I think there's a $10.2 million request, very small request in the budget, but for investment in cognitive domain, improving the impact of soft training and improving the outcomes so that maybe we are getting a little more preventive. Can you talk a little bit about what your plan is to spend this $10.2 million? I know it's a tiny bit of the budget. It's not as big as some parts of the budget, but it's an important part we're tracking.
Well, SOCOM has led our forces in terms of developing ways to make our warriors more efficient, more effective on the battlefield, and this is one of those things that they've been looking at for some time in terms of specific plans to invest those monies into various pieces and parts. I'll take that for the record because I don't have those facts at my fingertips.
That's fine. I think it's more about resilience of the warfighter before we put them in to a situation. So when they come out, they're more resilient as well. Can you briefly then, we described a little bit, how are you working to implement Directive 5111.10? That's the ASD SOLIC directive that DepSec Hicks put out. How are you working to implement that directive?
Well, as you know, our nominee to occupy that position has yet to be confirmed, but as Chris Meyer, and once he is confirmed, I have every confidence that he will do a great job in making sure that he keeps me informed of his needs in terms of service type needs and also what they're doing operationally. He will sit in on regular meetings with me. He will report directly to me on all service type issues, and he will also integrate his activities in with our policy branch, who, of course, will ensure that those activities are synchronized with the rest of the force. But to answer your question, we are moving out on this to realize Congress's intent here.
Thank you. General Milley, I don't want to let you go here without a question, and this one's about the Arctic. There's a broader, broader coordination that needs to take place throughout the U.S. government on Arctic policy generally, but the Defense Department has a piece of this. Can you articulate how the department sees the Arctic from a national security, through a national security lens, and then what you're doing to coordinate among the services the disparate ideas they have for presence in that region? You got 27 seconds.
I'll give you a fulsome answer in writing. I'll take that for the record.
Great.
But briefly, we recognize the importance and the increasingly growing importance of the Arctic as climate change causes the Arctic ice to melt and resources become available. And it's going to become an area of great power competition between the United States, China, and Russia, and perhaps other powers as well. So I'll give you a more full written answer on disposition of force and what we have planned ahead. One comment, though, if I could, real quick, and I know the Chairman's going to cut me off.
Real quick.
On the Special Operations Forces, we have the most disciplined, vetted Special Operations Force out there. I'm aware of the reports, talked to Rich Clark as well as the Secretary. We're getting after that very, very closely, but we have exceptionally disciplined and well-vetted Special Operations Forces.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Turner is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, as you know, we're undertaking our budgetary hearings, and as part of that, testifying before us was Acting Navy Secretary Thomas Harker. He and I had an exchange about a June 4th, 2021 memorandum that he wrote, directing the Navy to defund the Sea-Launched Cruise Missile nuclear capable for a budgetary year 2023. The budget that you have before us and that you are testifying before is in 2022, and it fully funds this program. Yesterday, I sent you a letter concerning my exchange with the acting secretary, and I'm not going to ask you for a decision today, but I do want to engage you about his testimony and the importance of what I have asked of you. The acting secretary acknowledged that he requested that this be defunded. He testified that he did not consult with anyone in the Pentagon, and in fact, both of you, Secretary Austin and General Milley, have testified that you were not consulted. Also, Admiral Richard, Stratcom, was not consulted, and Admiral Richard testifies that this missile is a much-needed, non-strategic regional presence to provide assured response capability, that it provides additional diversity in platforms and survivability, that it provides limited U.S. response options, it is a more credible deterrent, and it allows us to not rely on the threat of large-scale nuclear responses. Now, the acting secretary went on to tell us that he acknowledged that we're currently under analysis of alternatives with respect to this missile, and of course the nuclear posture review is ongoing, and he indicated that he was not qualified to have an opinion in either of those with respect to this missile, and yet he felt he was qualified to cancel it. Now, it's always concerning when we have testimony, as we have from the both of you, concerning China's and Russia's modernization, and when we have what is basically a bureaucratic intervention in what the important processes are in determining what our capabilities are going to be in the future as we respond to our adversaries' capabilities. Now, the acting secretary also affirmatively acknowledged that he understood that his memorandum was untimely and that the President of the United States was about ready to sit down with Vladimir Putin, and that it undermined the President of the United States because as he's trying to engage Vladimir Putin in treaty negotiations for arms control, certainly Vladimir Putin doesn't care about arms control if we're going to unilaterally be giving up platforms. And the acting secretary, on his own, as he says, without consulting anyone, signaled to Russia and our adversaries and our allies that what Admiral Richards says is an important component of our overall capabilities is not going to be pursued in 2023. Now, I've sent you a letter asking you to rescind this because we have the testimony directly from the acting secretary saying he's not qualified to make this decision, that he understands it affects the United States standing and our arms control negotiations posture, that he understands that Admiral Richards says that it's an important capability that we have going forward in the future. Now, I'm not going to ask you today to commit to rescinding this, but I do want to ask you, are you concerned about this process that an acting secretary could issue a memorandum canceling a very important nuclear weapons program without consulting anyone in the Pentagon? He testified here that he had not consulted anyone. You both testified you were not consulted. Admiral Richard, who says it's essential for the future capabilities and references what China and Russia is doing for modernization, says he was not consulted. And the acting secretary himself acknowledges that it undermines the President of the United States. Does that concern you?
Make 2 points very quickly. The first point is the nuclear triad is very important to us, and I'm fully committed to its modernization. The second point I would make is that we've said a number of times that we're going to conduct a nuclear posture review, and in that review, we're going to ensure that we have the right balance and mix of forces and capabilities. I think that any announcements or decisions about FY23 prior to the termination of that review or completion of that review is premature.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I really do appreciate it. General Milley, I want to thank you for your service. I did on the phone yesterday. I think your credibility is incredibly important to both for our allies and our adversaries. Do you believe Ukraine deserves lethal weapons support from the United States?
I do, and we've provided lethal weapons in the past, but they're lethal weapons for defensive purposes only.
I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Courtney is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again to both witnesses. And Secretary Austin, you know, I just wanted to follow up one point which was made. I'm not going to ask you to comment on it, but the budget did come over later than normal, but I think it's important to remember that the transition team had an unprecedented level of lack of cooperation in terms of getting into the building and sitting down and really using November and December and early January as an opportunity to get a head start on the budget process. And to me, you know, just common sense tells us that that's one of the reasons why we're sort of a little late this year. But again, this committee is going to work hard to make sure that our mark proceeds, and we're going to do everything we can to get regular order. Both of you have talked, and the service chiefs in the last couple of weeks have stressed the importance of deterring pacing threats to our nation, particularly China and Russia. The fiscal year 22 budget includes a very noticeable, strong boost in investment in the Navy's undersea force, which General Milley alluded to briefly earlier here. Attack subs, the Columbia Ballistic Sub Program, and R&D for the follow-on to the Virginia program. Can you, Mr. Secretary in General, just sort of talk about how that undersea priority aligns with the goal to match the pacing threat in the Indo-Pacific region, as well as increased Russian submarine activity in the North Atlantic and the Arctic?
Yeah, first of all, we have the most dominant naval force on the face of the planet. And a key piece of that is, you know, what our key key piece of that capability is what our submarine force brings to the table. It is absolutely relevant to the future fight. It is necessary, and so I think our investments here are well placed. And I'll leave it at that.
Congressman, I would say that relevance to a future fight, a couple of things to consider. Survivability, smaller is better, dispersal, and submarines by their nature are extraordinarily survivable, they're very lethal, and they are one of the significant asymmetric advantages that the United States has. We have an incredible submarine force, and it is probably the most lethal weapon on a battlefield in some future operating environment. So continued investment in subs is well worth it.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, I've been on Sea Power for 15 years. This year's budget, it's unmatched in terms of the proposed spending levels. And I think it's worthy to, again, share that point. The number one acquisition authority, which both Admiral Gilday and I think even General Milley and others over the years has said, is the Columbia program, which is recapitalizing the sea-based leg of our triad. I was actually at EB on Monday and caught up with the program there. They are now at 85% design completion as construction begins. That is an unprecedented level of design completion in a shipbuilding program, which is a way of debugging the program to get the design done and make sure that then you just follow the requirements and stay within budget that's there. In 2015, this committee enacted the National Sea-Based Deterrence Fund, which was recognizing the bow wave of spending that Columbia was going to bring with it. And it set up, again, sort of special authorities for multi-year production, for materials, for different components of the program. It has saved millions of dollars, and CBO has validated that. However, I would just note, and I think Mr. Whitman would agree on this, is that it really has been underutilized by the Pentagon, and we, in this year's mark, are going to continue to pursue other opportunities to get savings and efficiencies through the National Sea-Based Defense Fund. I've talked to Undersecretary Hicks and Mr. Stephanie about these opportunities that are there. But again, there's no time to waste in terms of getting this program complete. I know, General Milley, you took a rain check to come up and visit the South Yard where the production is. It's eye-watering when you come up, and hopefully you'll join us soon to sort of see this very important program for our country.
I will do that, Congressman.
Great. And with that, I yield back.
Mr. Lamborn is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Smith, I've received a study by a retired commander of Air Force Space Command and NORAD Northcom and another lieutenant general saying that the Air Force never fully considered keeping Space Command in its current location, and doing so would save over $1 billion and save 7 years. And I'd ask unanimous consent to place this into the record.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Secretary Austin, this Monday, the Taliban seized control of a key district of Kunduz province in the north of Afghanistan, and it's the latest in a series of recent battlefield victories after peace talks have stalled. Dozens of districts have been taken over the Taliban since May 1st when NATO began withdrawing, and you've said that you, quote, "We're looking at the situation every day with a fresh set of eyes to see if you know the pace we are setting is the appropriate pace," unquote. So given the accelerating pace of Taliban victories and control of key districts since we've been withdrawing since May 1st, how are things going? I mean, is our withdrawal at an appropriate pace when they're picking up all these districts around the country?
Well, thank you. We are focused on, and the task that we have at hand is to conduct our retrograde in a safe, orderly, and responsible fashion. We've developed a very detailed plan to do that, and we have accomplished the task according to plan thus far, and really provided for the safety of not only our forces, but our allies as well. And we'll remain focused on that.
And as a follow-up on that, none of us want to see a bloodbath after we withdraw unless, you said there'd be a small presence guarding diplomatic personnel. But none of us want to see a bloodbath against women and children in particular, or against former U.S. supporters like translators. So how are we going to prevent that? I mean, how will the over-the-horizon process work, which I'm kind of skeptical about?
Yeah. So I would just point out to you on the over the horizon piece, we're doing over the horizon now. We don't have very much ISR on the ground in Afghanistan. It's coming from the Gulf countries. And our fighter support is also coming from either platforms at sea or from the Gulf countries as well. So we can do that. We have been doing it, and we're doing it very effectively. What we'd like to do going forward is shorten the legs that we're required to utilize by getting an agreement with one of the neighboring countries to base some of our ISR in one of those countries. But, you know, we're doing that effectively now. So it is not only possible, it is what we're doing. In terms of taking care of women and girls in Afghanistan, let me also at the very top say, I really appreciate the bipartisan support that we've seen for this. And I would also point to you that, and you've mentioned this, that our plan is to maintain an embassy there. And through the embassy, we'll continue to work programs that are focused on women and girls. And I would defer to Secretary Blinken to really outline that. I don't want to speak for him.
Okay, thank you. And we all do bipartisanly share those concerns. Is it at all possible to keep Bagram Air Force Base?
Could I make a comment, Secretary? If that, so a couple of quick comments here. On Bagram is not necessary tactically or operationally for what we're going to try to do here with Afghanistan. Consolidate on Kabul in support of their government. But to back up a little bit on the momentum of the Taliban, so to speak, there's 81 district centers that are currently, we think, are underneath Taliban control. That's out of 419 district centers. There's no provincial capital that is underneath Taliban control, and there's 34 of those. It is true that the Taliban are sniping at and picking off outposts, et cetera, and they have seized some district centers. 60% of the 81 were seized last year, and the others since the last 2 months or so. So yes, we're concerned, we're watching it, but there's a 300,000 plus or minus military force, Afghanistan Army and police force, and it is their job to defend their country. We're going to continue to, we're having a new relationship.
Again, I do apologize. Gentleman's time has expired.
I will. I owe you a better answer, and I'll get you one in writing.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay.
Yield back.
Mr. Garamendi is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Austin, General, thank you very much for your service, for your testimony today. A couple of things I'd like to get into. I think the U.S. is spending $770 billion, more or less. China about $250 billion, India 73, Russia 61. Just proportions here to keep in mind. The question really is, how are we spending it? And are we spending it the most effective way possible? General, you said the things, in answer to Mr. Rogers' question, you said the things that concern you most are cyber, subs, new weapons such as hypersonic, space, and AI, artificial intelligence. However, all of you want to maintain the triad, which will be $1 trillion plus over the next 15 years or so, 20 years maybe. One element of that is the GBSD, the replacement of the Minuteman III. The reality is the Minuteman III can be life extended. If we were to pause the GBSD for 12 to 15 years, during which time the Minuteman III could serve the same purpose and serve it well, can save somewhere north of $37 billion in the next 10 years. If you had $37 billion, which one of those unfunded priorities would you spend it on? Cyber? Subs? New weapons, hypersonic, long-range fires? Space security? Artificial intelligence? What would you do with $37 billion, which is available if we made a decision to pause the GBSD? Secretary Austin?
Yeah, so the evaluation of the GBSD is something that we will do as a part of or in the context of the nuclear posture review, and we'll take a deliberate and earnest look at where we are and where we need to go in the future. I think no matter what funds you have available, and I appreciate the question, it's always a question of kind of rank ordering the capabilities that we need in light of the threat that we're facing. And that would be deliberate work with the services to make sure that we are meeting the most pressing need.
Hey, Congressman, thanks for the question. I would not recommend taking that money away and putting it elsewhere. The recapitalization of the entire triad, to include the GBSD, is critical to our nation's security. And delay of 12 to 15 years, you'll have a gap. You'll have a gap in the land-based leg. According to the reports and the studies I've seen, I'll get with you offline and go through it from a technical standpoint and get the experts in. But what I've been briefed is, in order to make sure that there is no gap, we need to continue the investment in the GBSD without delay.
I'll take advantage of that offline, online,
Sure.
formal, informal, whichever way you want to do it, but I think the facts are not clear.
Okay.
I think the facts are quite clear that we could pause the GBSD and be secure with the Minuteman III as it is life extended over that period of time. And there's $37 billion available there. Could you describe the Pacific Initiative? War games were mentioned many times here. The question I want to raise is, can we sustain the fight in the Pacific? Do we have the necessary transport?
So from a military standpoint, can we sustain a fight in the Pacific against China? And I think what we're talking about is a war against China. I think a war against China would be an enormously expensive undertaking in terms of all measures, and I would be concerned about the ability to sustain a long-term conflict. The idea, though, is to deter conflict and to keep great power competition at competition and not get it into conflict. But if we had a war with China, sustaining a fight would be a significant challenge. There's no question about it.
I would just add on there, sir, that we would look to prosecute that fight in a much different fashion. And I know that you've worked your way through all of this, distributed, resilient capabilities, 5 domains, and so it's a different look.
The gentleman's time has expired. Ms. Hartzler is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. Secretary Austin, our aircraft carriers are in high demand, and I understand that you're having to make difficult decisions about where to send them. Already this year, 2 carriers have undertaken double pump deployments. That means the service lives on our tactical aviation aircraft are being drawn down even more rapidly than previously planned. The Navy currently has a strike fighter shortfall of 49 aircraft. Despite this, the budget request has proposed to shift procurement dollars from building the new Block 3 Super Hornets into development of the next generation replacement aircraft, which is not slated to have initial operating capability until the 2030s. So taken into consideration the operations tempo of our carrier fleet demanded by our security environment, the strike fighter shortfall, possible attrition of aircraft, F-35C costs, and the likelihood of the next generation air dominance schedule could continue to slip to the right. Are you concerned about having sufficient tactical aviation fleet to deter and respond to China in the near term?
Short answer is I believe that we'll have if we stay on pace and invest in the things that we want to invest in, we'll have the right capabilities to match our strategy going forward and support our operating concepts. Again, I think that you have to make decisions to invest in future capabilities, as we discussed this morning. We've worked with the services very closely and carefully to identify what those requirements are.
I think it provides too much operational risk in the near term, and we need to re-examine that. And I'm going to be working to try to get some more F-18s in this year's budget, because I believe that's too much a shortfall that we have right there. But I want to change topics and just say how much I appreciate our men and women in uniform, and I believe that they're absolute heroes. They should be respected and encouraged in every way. And I'm very concerned about the recent order that you have conducted regarding looking at so-called extremism. And I have sent to you 2 letters, Mr. Secretary, asking for the definition of what the Department of Defense views as extremism, and have not heard back from you yet. And so could you just share with me, does the Department of Defense have a clear definition of extremism?
A couple of comments on this issue. First of all, I think you've heard me say that on a number of occasions that I believe that 99.9% of our troops are focused on the right things, embracing the right values each and every day. Small numbers of people in this area can have outsized impact on our organization. And so we want to make sure that we're providing the right climate, the right environment for our troops to work and live in. We are focused on extremist behavior, not what people think or political ideas or religious ideas, but extremist behavior.
So do you have a definition of what extremism is and what that behavior is?
Again, we're focused on behavior.
Well, you had a stand down, and you had a pause over the entire military for an entire day to do training, to talk about this, and you don't have a definition yet of what the purpose was and what extremism is?
The purpose was to help to have a discussion with our troops and our leaders on the issue of extremism.
Okay.
And that was very productive. And again, we were focused on those behaviors that that are not in congruence with our values in the military.
Okay. And you have
Madam
ordered
Congressman?
that there be this commission and have a review, and I guess I just want a little more information. You're setting up and proposing a new screening capability, ongoing continuous vetting of our men and women in uniform, and you're going to develop a policy to expand user activity. So what specifically would you be screening for? So if you set up this screening of our military members, what are you screening for?
Our screening is focused on screening those applicants that are coming into the military. We want to make sure that we're bringing in the right type of people, quality of people.
So if someone says that they're for President Trump, would that be viewed as extremism?
As I said earlier, this is not about politics. I want our troops to participate in our political system.
Well,
That's
I'll
what
just
they're
say-
fighting to defend. But I will also say that we will continue to be a diverse and inclusive organization. And that's what the United States military is all about.
So I would just
Gentlelady's
encourage us
time
not
has
to
expired.
infringe on our
and
liberties.
I'm sorry, but time has expired. Ms. Spears recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To both of you, thank you so much for your outreach. I want to say to you, Secretary Austin, we talked some months ago. You're a man of your word. And, excuse me, I am deeply grateful for the statement you put out yesterday. You are creating a profound transformation in the military as we address sexual assault and sexual harassment. So thank you. I want to ask you, I'm deeply concerned about the suicide rate in the military right now. There have been 10 suicides in Alaska already this year. There was a 30% increase in suicides last year over the year before. And I would like to recommend to you, much like you did with sexual assault and sexual harassment, is to stand up a commission to look at what we should be doing to address this, I think, frightening situation. But that won't be my question. I want to ask you about the climate surveys. We spent a lot of time, a lot of money on climate surveys. And what we found out in the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee was that they were not even looked at. So what steps are you taking moving forward to make sure not only are the commanders on the ground there looking at these climate surveys each year, but that those above them, the senior leadership, is looking at them as well?
Well, first of all, let me thank you personally and thank the committee as well for all that you have done to remain focused on the issue of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and the resources that you continue to provide to make sure that we don't lose focus. We truly appreciate your support. The survivors appreciate your commitment, and the troops in our ranks appreciate that as well. And we will get this in the right place. And it will require a lot of hard work, a lot of commitment and dedication, and it will require resources. And so I would ask that you continue to support us as we take this on. Could you repeat the last part of the question there? I kind of lost.
Climate surveys.
Oh, climate surveys, yeah. So one of the things that the Independent Review Commission recommended to us is that we take a harder look at what we're doing with climate surveys, that they be current, that the leadership pay attention to what's going on with them, and that we refine the surveys to make sure that we're asking the right questions in the surveys. And so we'll remain cited on this, and I would agree with you. They only work if you use the information that's in them.
If I could make a comment, Congressman, the
Yes,
climate
absolutely.
surveys need to be reviewed by the commanders at least 2 levels up. Previously, years gone by, Fort Hood as example, they weren't. There were reasons for that because we thought it was best to be used only by the commander, give free and open feedback to the commander, and then they would take appropriate action. That didn't work, so now what we need to do is shift gears and make sure those climate surveys are personally reviewed by commanders at least 2 levels up on all their subordinates.
And you're going to do that at all installations, correct?
Everywhere, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, at all echelons.
So, General, let me ask you about OPTEMPO. We had a conversation just earlier this week about it. It appears that the OPTEMPO has really had a profound effect on our service members. I think it's starting to impact retention. And as I mentioned to you at the time, one of the spouses at one of our installations had said to me that she was concerned every night when she came home because she was afraid she was going to see her husband hanging in the shower. What steps are we taking to make sure that the training we do is necessary and appropriate? General Milley?
The training of units is a commander's responsibility. And again, 2 levels up, commanders routinely develop their training plans, back brief them, and get them approved. And they are tied directly to war plans to ensure that the training is focused on the readiness and the capability of the force to execute those tasks for which they're required in accordance with the various war plans. So it's a very focused level of effort, has been for years, and they still are. The broader question is OPTEMPO. And OPTEMPO is directly related to the size of the force. As the OPTEMPO came down from the peak of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, so did the size of the force. So the relative OPTEMPO in any given unit, especially Special Operations Forces, which was mentioned earlier, still remains high. It's a big concern. It impacts all kinds of things, to include suicides. So that's the key metric, is the OPTEMPO on a given
Again,
force in a
I'm
given
sorry, the
individual. Sorry.
gentleman's time has expired. We will get one more in, and then we're going to take our break. So Mr. Scott is recognized, and when he is done, we'll take a brief break. Mr. Scott is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I want you to know I support coming out of Afghanistan. One of the things that is on, I think, every member of this committee's mind is what's going to happen with special access visas for our interpreters. And while I don't expect you to necessarily speak in this setting about that, I do hope that there's progress in the right direction with regard to the special access visas, and I do hope that it's just got to be done. And one other thing that I would mention is with regard to our troops, I do think that we should look at making internet service similar to water on basis for our troops. Just make internet service a basic utility. It does not sound like that big of a deal, but if we're able to save our troops $50 or $60 or $70 a month, whatever they're having to pay for that internet access, it makes a big difference to, especially to our younger enlisted corps. One other comment would be, after spending time with some of your ODA teams in Africa, this is not a DoD mission, but I do think it is would be a State Department mission or perhaps another State Department's mission, the French State Department potentially. But when we bring these troops in and we have them for 24 months and they come in with an 8th grade education, I do not think they should leave with an 8th grade education. I think that while we're training them to fight, when we've got them 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, we need to have somebody trying to educate those troops so that we haven't simply trained them to fight and released them back on the street and potentially turn it into the foes of the future, if you will. Those are just a couple of things I wanted to mention before I hit on a specific weapon system. And Secretary Austin, General Brown and I have met at Robins Air Force Base. I know that you have called for the President has asked for the drawdown of 4 of the JSTAR aircraft from the 116th. I support this retirement, given the commitment to Robins Air Force Base and the ABMS mission. I do have concerns about the ground moving target indication capability, and are you convinced that the Air Force can provide the GMTI capabilities with the existing fleet?
I am convinced that the Air Force continues to upgrade and modernize its fleet of sensors to ensure that we have the capability that we'll need going forward. And I'm also, sir, very encouraged to know that General Brown has worked with you in terms of what the future is for that base and other capabilities in the fleet there. So.
Well, I would like to invite both of you to Robins Air Force Base to review the ABMS mission and the good work that's going on down there. A lot of good things are happening. General Milley, I mean, we've all talked about China a little bit. This spring, the Southcom Commander, Admiral Fowler, told our committee that our interagency partners in the United States pointed out that Chinese money laundering is the #1 underwriting source for transnational criminal organizations. This is in obviously Central and South America. Our AFRICOM Commander, General Townsend, testified that illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing by the Chinese Communist Party is the primary contributor to a growing food crisis that will further drive instability in West Africa. So my question is, how do we counter this ongoing malign activity from China around the world? And what are our partners that share our interests and our values doing to help us combat that malign activity?
The issue of China obviously is not just a Western Pacific issue, it's a global issue. China's a massive economy. They're developing a first-rate military, and they are expanding their missions and aspirations globally, not just regionally. That includes South America, as Admiral Fowler said, and Africa and elsewhere. And we are working closely with our allies and partners in all of those regions to counter any sort of great power competition that they have in mind in each of those regions. So we're doing that as we speak with all of the countries of our allies and partners. That network of allies and partners around the world is one of the single most important things we can do as a nation, is to maintain it, keep it robust, and that will help in this competition with respect to China.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time and your service. I'm extremely concerned that China is becoming much more aggressive, not just with regard to the military
Gentlemen's
buildup.
time has expired.
Treatment of the.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.